Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another brand new episode of the GFreak Speaks podcast. I'm your host for the evening tonight, Jacko GFreak, where we speak to anyone who has a passion for gaming within the industry. And for today's episode number 2, we're joined by the one and only Ben Green. How you doing, Benny?
I'm good, and I'm definitely anyone. So I'm glad that I'm here. But episode number 2, that's pretty good. When you get to like episode 500, you can look back and be like, wow, that episode number 2 was one of the best 500 that we've had so far.
The Sandman himself. So I'm a big fan. Benny. I remember when we first met, but
Really?
look, I want to go back to who are you today? Okay, so you're Benny Green. So tell me a bit about yourself. Okay, so how old you are, where you're from, where you grew up, and go from there.
All right, I am old. Somewhere in my mid-ish 30s, believe it or not. So I got into gaming quite late, really. But I guess the context of the Australian esports landscape, right, is that there wasn't that much there 10 years ago. If you wanted a job in gaming in Australia, it was you probably had to work for a publisher, or maybe you could work for EB Games. Like that was like really what could you do? So it was pretty tough, and there wasn't much in the way of esports jobs. I'm originally from Brisbane, but living the Sydney dream at the moment, which is, to be fair, what a lot of people who grabbed a job in esports have had to do. And I work for ESL, looking after the publishers and our partners here in Australia and New Zealand. And essentially, my day to day is talking to publishers or partners and helping them make esports programs and going through the specifics. You know, you get a brief, you quote it out, and then if they agree, you go ahead and you run it. So that's it, rinse and repeat. And obviously have a bit of a background as a shoutcast, which is how I got into esports to begin with. So yeah, started off shoutcasting, ended up moving across to more of the business side of things about 5 years ago. And I'd probably be doing less and less commentating ever since.
Yeah, well, look, I remember back when you were commentating. The first time I saw you commentating was at the Melbourne Esports Open, and you wore that luscious white suit, man. And I was like,
Jacket, yeah.
you went real well, man. It was awesome. It'd be great to see you out there a bit more. But I guess other people are out there, and you know, when they need the big guns and the big checks, there, Eddie Green steps up.
Yeah, they roll me out. No, that it's hard to do both, and it's hard to do both jobs well. You know, to put the effort into learning the games and being across, you know, everything that's going on in a title, whilst also working a job that's really more than 9 to 5. I think it would be easier if I had like a 9 to 5 job that was kind of like once you went home, you don't have to think about it anymore. But esports, yeah, definitely isn't like that. So, but it's good that I do still get to do the odd bit of commentating, and hopefully I'll get to continue a little bit. But definitely, I think for me, I'm probably I'm not going to break out and become, you know, some world famous commentator from now. So I'm probably going to have to rely on working in esports on you know, sort of behind the scenes to earn the dollars.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough, man. You never know. Never know. The Sandman might be out there, and maybe one day might be up on the CDL stage or the Counter-Strike stage worldwide. That'd be something really cool. What was the biggest event you've shoutcasted at?
It's a tricky one because it really depends. Probably like the actual biggest event that I've done is Crossfire Stars, which is it's a game made in Korea that's very popular in Southeast Asia, and the event is held in China. Um, the last 3 times I've gone, it's like a massive stage, giving away like $1 million. You know, it's absolutely huge across Asia. Not very many people watch it over here though, so that's probably the biggest event I've done globally. Um, but here in Australia, there's like all sorts of cool things, like the Fortnite stuff at the Australian Open was pretty awesome. All the Overwatch stuff that I've done, like it's hard to work out which is bigger than the other because it's, you know, they've all got their own awesomeness, I suppose. But I reckon I've probably done like 20 different games.
Yep.
Across the last sort of 10 years, so probably more than that, but probably 20 games I've been paid for probably 20 games.
Okay.
Uh, if you don't count back in the day when you used to have to do it for free.
Yeah, pretty much.
So
Or your
yeah,
game vocabulary would be quite large, which is which is hard because I know that a lot of commentators in esports have to do a lot, keep up to date with the dictionary and keep up to date with terms and sayings and hill rotations and guns and movement and player names. And it's hard enough when you watch like AFL and regular sports with knowing whose free kick it is and whatnot, but let alone doing it when you're shoutcasting and have to do it in the heat of the moment. You've got all this crowd just behind you, yelling, roaring. But tell me a bit about that game that was developed in China. I've personally never heard of it, and I think the listeners would like to know about it as well.
yeah. Crossfire is I would say it's kind of like a cross between COD and CS. So it looks similar to CS. It's like Counter Strike, but there's no economy. So you can pick, like if you're playing Search and Destroy in COD, you pick your loadout, you take in what you want. But then the play style is very much uh, uh, closer to Counter Strike. So yeah, it's like a CS without an economy. But it's super popular across Asia, in Brazil as well. And normally it's like either a Chinese team or a Brazilian team that wins. And this event, Crossfire Stars, is essentially like the best players, and this is like the world finals. So um, it goes off like normally there's a team from North America, a team from Europe, there's like a team from Egypt, which is kind of cool. Yeah, and they have honestly some of the biggest stages I've ever seen. Um, One of the stages was literally it. I would say it was probably like a 60-meter long stage where it was all LED. So it was LED across the bottom on the floor, and then LED up on an angled wall, and then uh, the player booths came out of the lead wall and they sort of spun around. So they'd have like they do like a laser, make it look like it's cutting out the wall,
Yeah,
and then the lead shows it like it's cutting out, and then smoke comes out, and then the boots come out of the wall and they spin around. Um, yeah, so it's actually a lot of fun.
that's really
So
cool.
it's a cool event. Yeah, it's a really cool event. Um, and we're very lucky to get to do it. Obviously, haven't been able to do it with COVID because can't travel, but hopefully we get to do it again in the future. So yeah, it's if you watched it, you would understand. Like if you're a CS:GO or a COD fan and you
Yep.
watched it, you'd understand it pretty quickly. Like
Yeah.
it's very similar to Search and Destroy.
I remember watching like back to the main stage stuff. I remember always. I'm a massive COD fan, as you know, and I always watch the boys optic, the boys in green, and yeah, the stages there are phenomenal. But when I got that first hand experience at Melbourne Esports Open, that was a total different thing again. Like it was a massive stage, packed arena, big amount of people there. The atmosphere was it just kind of sends shivers down your spine, and then to also be able to go out the back and see how it all works. It's all dark and it's got all these blue lighting, so then it doesn't hurt the people's eyes out the back when they're processing the games and all that type of stuff. It was just like wow. I didn't realize that there was so much stuff that went into it, as well as that there was a broadcast truck that was like $25 million underneath, and I'm like,
Yeah,
that's just
yeah.
that's insane. It's insane. It really is insane.
There is way more like that goes into those events than people would think. And I can understand why you might think that. Like you'd be like, oh yeah, how like yeah, there's a bit of money here, but how hard is it to put on when it's literally like months and months and months of work to do it. And when you look at the amount of stuff that actually goes on at those events, like it's just insane to be able to organize it and the amount of tech. Because the reality is that like gaming tech isn't really designed to be broadcast. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
if you look at what we're doing, it's not, you're playing games on PCs, and quite often, like as more and more games come out, you'll get to a point where those games maybe don't even have spectator functions yet or whatever it might be. And we're constantly trying to overcome, um, it's not like you're just grabbing a video feed from a camera and sending it through to a TV truck. There's a lot that goes into making gaming broadcast ready. And then for the big events where they do bring in the TV trucks, it's still like the normal staff end up in the truck, and they might have like one person from the TV truck company will run like the audio desk or something that's like whatever, that's their special desk, but everything else is just the same.
Yep.
So it's all the same guys. And it takes a lot of people to put that stuff on. It's yeah, I think the average person would be surprised if they got to do the same thing, right? Look behind the curtain and see how many people are back there.
I know that it's just another like quiet night rave out the back. Like it's one of those silent discos. Everyone's just there, like, you know, little gremlins like behind the desks and look peeping over their computers when I came back there, and it was just something completely. It was a different world. It honestly was opening the curtain literally to a different world out the back. And you, like you said, you don't know and understand how much work, time, effort, money goes into it until you really see what happens behind those curtains, doors, etc., etc. So it really is awesome.
And when you look there, like what you see like behind the curtain, that's like the League Ops team and the guys running what's going on the screens, right? And then there's a whole other team elsewhere doing like the broadcast side of things and pulling it all together. So yeah, the arena shows are pretty wild.
Exactly. If I had to describe it to the people that are listening right now, pretty much it's out the back of a theater. So picture like half of Rod Laver cut out, and then at the back of that, the other half on the ground floor, center court, would be a lot of computers. It's really dark, like it's pitch black. There's smoke. There's a lot of smoke. The blue lights are coming from the ceiling like a nightclub, or you see down the alleyways in the city. And it's just really dark, and all you've got is just the shadowing of people's faces, like the light reflecting off their faces from their computer screens. They've got their headsets. There's little, you know, the red and green and yellow lights flicking for the audio, and it really is quite the thing to see. It's hard to describe, but I think I've done a pretty decent job there. But look, Ben, tell me a bit about your job in like feeling pressure to perform and whatnot. Like if you don't close out those clients that you're talking about, or you know you don't have a good day on the casting, how do you feel the pressure? How do you deal with it?
Yeah, I think it's like gaming, like esports is quite stressful. I think for a lot of people working in it. Either I think the same for players, right? Like if you're casting and you make a mistake, then everyone sees it, right? Like literally everyone sees it, and there's not that much you can do about it. And for the guys who are you know, who are doing it serious business on the world stage, right? You got tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people watching those guys. I think that is quite stressful for them and quite high stakes. Same for the players, obviously, living, you know, one play that no one else who's watching can make. But if you stuff it up, then you're the bad guy. What can you do about it? In day to day at work, there is a lot of pressure, and I think a lot of the pressure comes from as well that not everyone you're necessarily working with understands exactly what is possible and what's not possible. A lot of it's like managing expectations and making sure that what we can achieve matches up to what they want to do, and that matches up with like your client budget, and then you know that all matches up with what the game's capable of doing. And yeah, I think that's quite like managing expectations actually a massive part of my day in all aspects of what I do, and just making sure that everyone comes into understanding and knowing what they want to get out of it, and that it's possible to get out of it. The other hard part, I think the hardest part is that like feels like it doesn't stop. It's not 9 to 5. And particularly when you think that essentially you spend a week or spend the week doing the job, but then all of the events, they're not running at 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. The events are in the evening or the events are on the weekend. And if there's problems, then that comes back to you and you need to work on that. And then the people who are working on those shows, you need to work with them during the week as well to make sure that, you know, like to chat through what's going on. So even though that they're working nights, you're working daytimes, etc. And then you combine that with time zones, and quite often either the client or other people from the company or like publishers are based around the world, and you're trying to turn things back and get responses overnight. And if you like an email comes in at midnight, it's like, oh, I'm awake. If I don't reply now, then it's going to take another 24 hours until I get a reply. And everyone's just trying to play this game. Like, how do you match up calls from different parts of the world? Most of them were in Australia, so they end up being at night. We're the odd one out, right? Like,
yeah,
Australia, all right, Australia, you guys can probably make our time zone.
It's the one person compared to 10.
Yeah, exactly right. So it's a lot like that. So that's kind of the pressure. Like it's a constant always on, which I think is the toughest. And I would say that most people who work in esports experience that, like that constant. And when your work is your passion as well, and like you go on your socials or you go whatever, like you never really turn off. And then when I want to enjoy myself, I go and play a game or I watch Twitch, and it's all the same. So it's hard to complain because you're doing what you love, but at the same time, um, I think to be able to produce a product that you love, the process isn't particularly lovable.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
No, I totally understand. Like I'm a tradie, as majority of people know, but to get into esports and work the job that you really love, and it's kind of like full-time streaming. It's probably going to be one of the hardest jobs you work, because it's genuinely like it just esports doesn't stop. Esport is 24/7. It doesn't stop. Time zones is a factor. You got to close the deal. If you see the email, you got to reply. You got to stay up. You got to wait. People, I've found that sometimes it's a little bit unreliable. You're waiting for a response and they may not even respond straight away. You're like, well, I just wasted 6 hours when I could have been sleeping, type of thing. And then they reply later and you're like, oh, then there's so many like legal things where they have to go to a different team and ask for permission, and just all those things, all those factors that come into play that you would never have thought of just putting like together a tournament with another team, or like an advertisement with another team, because they hire another company to then film the work, and then they have to ask, is the client happy? And it's crazy.
Why can't you just X? I hear that a lot. Why don't you just do blah? It's like, well, there's actually 5 different parties involved in doing whatever it is that you want to do. And the community, I guess, doesn't see that, right? It's like, why haven't you run this? Well, firstly, we don't own the game. And to get permission to run the game, you need to go through someone based here in Australia for a game that's based overseas. And then it's like 5 parties later, you get the answer that you want, and everyone's a stakeholder.
It's shocking.
Yeah. So, but that's the business. That's the deal. It's how it works. So
pretty much how it works. You got to have thick skin in a way. You got to be patient. I know that sometimes with me, I'm like, I just want a response. I'm ready. I'm waiting. I'm done. Yeah. I've finished work for the day. I'm waiting for that response or whatever. But yeah, I totally understand. And that's what sometimes people need, a little bit of patience when they're, working those deals out, working for ESL yourself. You understand, and closing out those deals, it does take a lot of time to get that perfection. You just want to get it over the line and run a cool event, but there's so many sources you've got to go through to just get that event running for just like the simplest thing. It's insane. The trademarks, the licensing, the copyright, the money, the legality of what you can and can't say, if it's an invitation or if it's how much money and all that type of stuff. It's just, there's so much to it, but it's a new world and it's a definite learning experience for a lot of people, I find. But tell me about how you got into ESL specifically, because that's a really big one. A lot of people would admire and look up to you and how you got into ESL, because that's a worldwide brand in esports. So tell us about it.
Yeah, I think I was kind of lucky at the start. So I've been with ESL for a bit over 5 years now. And before I was here, I was sort of working for myself, running like my own quote unquote like production company. Not really, but more so just producing my own commentated esports shows. I was adminning games for Cybergamer. I think I'd just taken a role as general manager for the Chiefs, which was unpaid at the time, as was literally everything. And I had, as I think the guys, Nick Vanzetti and the guys at ESL who were VIM or ACL back in the day, Australian Cyber League, had just, because I think were intending to move across to being ESL at a certain point. We're looking at Counter-Strike, and at the time, I was casting Counter-Strike. Not particularly well, but no one cared. Like, no one wanted to do the job when I was doing it. Like, no one wanted to be a Counter-Strike caster like 7 years ago. I was supposed to be hosting like Cybergamer finals, but because they didn't have enough commentators for CSGO, I was commentating some of the games as well. With guy, I think I was casting with Elfish Guy and Uber, who's now at Overwatch League, and yeah, like I essentially became a Counter-Strike shoutcaster, even though I wasn't necessarily looking to become a Counter-Strike shoutcaster, because that's what we needed. We needed people to do it, because it's not like it is now where people are retiring and they want, they go from being a pro player into commentating or whatever, and they're just there wasn't any money in it. So why would you really want to do it?
Yep.
So I was just doing it. And as ACL started to do some more CSGO events, they needed shoutcasters. So Nick reached out to us. It's like, hey, do you want to come and cast some CS for us? Plus, we've got this, I can't talk to you about it, but we've got this big event coming up. So come and do some stuff for us. And there's a big one coming up after that. And, you know, like you'll probably want to do it. So we went and we did like a couple of ACLs. We did Sydney and Melbourne. And at the Melbourne one, I think it was, they mentioned to us that they had this event at Crown Casino coming up, which was the Crown 55,555, whatever it was, invitational that had Virtus Pro and Cloud9 coming out. So I got that gig to host that for them, which was like at the time the coolest thing I'd ever done. It was, you know, it was on TV, broadcast to Fox Sports Live, and I think they sold out 800 tickets in less than half an hour. So it was really cool. It was like sort of this massive thing for the CS community. So we got to do that. And then I hosted the pack stage for them that year as well. I think that was the first time they'd done the ESL pack stage. So ESL as a brand was sort of in Australia from like a mid to end of 2015, I think. And from that, obviously I'd been doing this other stuff where I general managed at Avant, and then I was general manager at Chiefs. And I was like, you do a lot of reporting. Like essentially that's what it is. Really what you're doing is managing sponsor obligations, and sponsors are like, hey, you owe part of this, you're supposed to be doing XYZ number of videos, or we want to, can you do me a report on this activation you did, or can you give me a report on the last 3 months or the last 6 months or whatever. And a lot of what I was doing there was just generating reports with social stats and what we played in and screenshots, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what it is. And you send it back off, and it justifies the money that the sponsor spent. So Nick had a role that he wanted to fill, which was essentially helping him with that. Because at the time he was doing most of the selling, most of the sponsor selling and publisher selling, etc. There weren't that many staff at ESL at the time, like under 10, I would say. And most of those were like the core guys who had done ACL, and then some like the production team, the video team. So I kind of sort of came on as like the first sales guy.
Yep.
And at PAX of 2015, it's like, hey, maybe there's going to be this role, etc. Would you be interested? We'll see. Like, I'm looking to fill it next year, sort of thing. And then in March of 2016, he offered me the role, and I'd bought a unit in Brisbane at the time. I was like, yeah, I finally bought my place. I'm going to live in Brisbane and not waste money, and that's my life, and do this esports stuff on the side. And then I had to sort of pack up and move to Sydney. And I've been wasting money renting in Sydney for the last 5.5 years, trying to live the esports dream. And that's pretty much how I got there. So, and I've just sort of over time changed roles within ESL. And now Nick runs APJ and not Australia. And, the dynamics of what ESL Australia is different. I think there's like 25 plus full-timers and another 20 odd like casuals. Like, it's a pretty big crew now, which is kind of awesome. So yeah, that's kind of how I got it. But to get to that point, I'd had to get a job in May of 2016. I'd had to work essentially for free for myself and whatever since mid 2012.
Yeah.
And that was the grind to get to that point.
Yep.
So I think it's better now. Like,
yeah,
much easier now than it's like, I know it's not easy, but it's definitely, you hopefully don't have to spend 4 or 5 years spending on your money making your own company to do it. So
yeah, I think there's a lot more transparency with the fact that if you want to be a esports caster or someone involved with that company, there's more of a direct route of how to get there, how you do it, and what to do. I think that back when you did it, even when listening to another podcast, Courage, Jack Courage Dunlop, he used to go places and travel there and just do it all for free, and then slowly got his foot in the door, like yourself. And same as Maven from COD League and Miles Ross as well. And, that they did all those hard yards over the years, all that free type of stuff.
Well, Miles used to be a Halo caster, and we had to convince him to come and do COD. come and do COD League in Australia for us. And
Yep.
now look at him. So I'm not going to say that we made the real Miles Ross, okay?
Yeah.
But
well,
look,
but maybe
gave
pretty
him a
much.
gave him a small helping hand to move him across to COD at the time, which certainly worked out well. But he's smashing it, obviously.
Yeah. Well, a gentle nudge in the right direction. And I'm thinking that he will definitely be beers on him. Seeing as though now he's got I think he's in COD League, isn't he? Yeah, he is.
Yeah, he's in COD League.
So he's living over there, living the dream, mate. Got a good contract with them, COD League. So
yeah, not bad.
Yeah, not bad. Good salary, good size. That's all right. So good on him. But yeah, and it just also goes to show where else you can, a different direction you can travel. You know, you may be casting, then you go back into the office like yourself, and you can do both and do the hybrid, as well as go back to casting, change game, like you said with Miles, change game. You know, who would have ever thought that you change game and that would lead to a more successful opportunity in esports? But you never know. I think the doors are opening. It's kind of like that early days thing with with AFL years ago and everything. Like now there's a more clear path with it, how to get into it. A lot of people are doing it. So there's a lot of competition out there, as well as the internet is evolving. So there's a lot more eyes and ears listening and watching to everything that you do. That's why you have to be professional with how you conduct yourself on the internet. Because I was always taught that once it's there, it's there. No matter what, if you delete it or not, it's on the internet. So just got to be careful with the things you say and just handle yourself professionally and look after yourself and, really have that end goal in mind with where you're going with things. Like yourself, you work hard, you do a lot of those free hours and, not saying that it's always going to pay off. They're the risks that people take, but they do pay off in the end. Like most do. If you work hard and your passion's there, and you're driven enough for the goal, then there's more that, there's going to be a doorway that's going to open for you in the right direction, I believe.
Yeah, I think for most people, it's definitely achievable. There are some people, it's tough, not every role's for everyone, right? You can really want a role, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to get it for whatever reason. But it does mean that you can't be a part of it in some way. Like I want to be a shoutcast, but I'm probably, you know what I mean? Like I got to where I'm at, but I'm not going to be as good as Miles or Uber or those guys, right? Like they are just better than me at what they do. So for me, where can I find my sort of place in the ecosystem? And I think you're right about socials as well. I think people would underestimate the amount of people who see what they post on social. And that sometimes I think there are sometimes you won't get stuff because of stuff you've done. So it will impact, I think, people's perspective of you, even if that's maybe unfair. I think that's just how it goes, right? People see it. And particularly when someone can go, it's a small community. The Australian and New Zealand
it's tiny
community is really quite small. So you interact with people for years, and you'll come across them in different roles. So I think the thing is just doesn't hurt to try and be nice to people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't be the bad guy all the time. Try and try and boost people up, like their posts when they're promoting something for a partner, retweet something, that, support the community. Don't be the negative person that's trying to and even for myself, I find it hard to not be that sometimes, but you still need to at least try, right? You never know when you're going to come across someone.
Exactly. And in a way, we're all one team here, and we're kind of the odd guy out with meetings, because of time zones. And also when it comes to funding for esport events, for tournaments, when it comes to opportunities, there are quite a lot of opportunities here. If you talk about the grassroots type of things where with Melbourne Esports Open and PAX opportunities, for a smaller person compared to if you put that same person over in the States, you probably wouldn't get anything. But I totally agree with you, mate. And like how you were saying before about how you interact on social media, and then in regards to emails, I know that when I was talking to the team at Thermal Take, for example, and they were like, you were really nice on emails, but on socials, you seemed really you were really cocky because that's the character. And they're like, we didn't expect you to be so nice. And I'm like, it's just a persona. It's okay. So I totally understand where you're coming from there firsthand, because it's quite funny because everyone, that's why at Melbourne Esports over when I first met you. I came around, said g'day to everyone out of character, just so we can, break the ice. And then, say g'day, how you going and all that type of stuff. And then you get into character and then it's just like, it's the show's on. The show's on. So yeah, it's just one of those things, you got to really carry yourself well and professionally. But before we wrap up, quick question. Tell me a little bit about your whiskey enthusiasticness, and tell me a bit about that, and then we'll wrap it up after that.
About my whiskey? Oh, yeah, I don't even know where this all came from, to be honest. It just I just started having an interest in whiskey, and we went on a trip to Japan and went to one of the distilleries, and I was like, this is actually pretty cool. And I don't know, I like whiskey. Maybe sometimes I drink too much whiskey. I don't know, but it's a bit of a fun hobby to have. And for me, it was kind of cool that I get to do like a host the odd whiskey show. Like it's a little bit of crossover from what I do in gaming and then what I can do in sort of like that other world that I'm not a part of. It's really just about finding, I don't know if you could call it a hobby, but a community outside of like just the gaming community where I kind of, like I live in this bubble of gaming. And it's been good to find this whole other community of people who, it's not just about liking whiskey, but it's, it's just, there's a heaps of people. There's massive communities around the world based around whiskey and things like that. So it's just about, I think, finding a different group of people to converse with and making new friends and drinking a bit of whiskey. Because actually, I didn't think I liked it. When I was younger, I didn't like whiskey.
Yeah.
I used to drink Jameson dry and lime when I was on my 21st. I remember trying that and I was like, oh, I don't really like it that much. But now I've come to realize that if you buy a reasonable whiskey, it is actually quite enjoyable.
Okay.
So yeah, be surprised. But I probably bought too many bottles. I'm not buying any more bottles at the moment. We've stopped. I'm just slowly working through what we've got.
Black band yourself from the whiskey.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Look, man, I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. One last question is, where do you, this is a big community debate within my community, but where do you keep the butter? In the fridge or the pantry?
Where do you keep the butter?
Yeah, butter for like spreading on toast and
Why
bread.
would you keep the butter in the pantry? We don't live, this isn't the England. Okay, so if you live in the England, you keep your stuff out of the fridge because it's cold anyway, right?
That's right.
I don't think you want to keep butter on in the cupboard in northern Queensland or something.
Oh, definitely not.
Like, what would you? No, it's just I've never even heard of such a thing, but it sounds like a very British thing to do, and we don't live in the England, so that's my 2 cents. Everything in the fridge, even if it's annoying.
Yeah, I understand, mate. Thank you so much for your time, Ben Green. Where can we find all your socials? Where can we find your whiskey talk? Let me know, and just say right now, give yourself a shout out, just so the listeners know where you can find yourself, Ben Green, as well as your whiskey, and everything else that you get up to.
Everything else, just hit me up at benslodge on Twitter, on Insta, on Twitch, and that's why it's such a dumb name, because I could get it on all three. So that's pretty much it. Instead of at Ben Green AU / at Ben Green _AU / whatever. No, we culled it. All Ben's Lodge. It's dumb. It doesn't matter. When I post on Twitch, people are like, hello, Ben's. Like my name is Ben and it's my lodge, but that's fine. So it's a little bit weird, but I have it on everything, so it doesn't matter.
Not the Sandman.
So, yeah, exactly right.
I love it, mate. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate that. That's just episode number 2 of GFreak Speaks. We'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.